It's Brittany with Chainmakers. Today, I'd like to welcome Nick from the Solana Foundation. Hi, Nick.
Hi, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
So, I would love for you to give a little bit of background on your path to getting to the Solana Foundation, and then we'll go in a little bit more about your role as a head of institution at Solana Foundation.
Great. So, very briefly, I started my career as a securities lawyer just after the dot-com and worked on really fun public and private offerings of all shapes and sizes, including M&A. I had a small role in the MySpace acquisition by Fox, which was a lot of fun. And, working with a bunch of founders, I got to the point where I said, like, I'd rather do that than be a lawyer. And so in 2010, I left to start a company. It was backed by Tim Draper, among others, and we exited in 2014. And that's really when I kind of began messing around with crypto. My co-founder YOLO'd into Bitcoin, and they ended up starting Unchained Capital to solve their own problem, which was custody of their Bitcoin. And they kind of helped me along my crypto journey. And then in 2017, another friend started another company during the ICO boom called Flipside Crypto, which was at the time doing baskets of altcoins, and then ultimately became a data platform. And kind of while all this was happening, I was still doing more traditional tech startup stuff. Exited another company in 2021, and my wife said, Nick, you've been messing around with crypto as a side project for the better part of a decade. It's time for you to make this your day job. And so I was fortunate to join a venture fund in early 2022 as the crypto lead, and was there through the fun times of 2022 and early part of 2023, which was the Terra Luna, FTX, and then First Republic and Silicon Valley Bank failures.
You also got some NFTs in there. You were in the CryptoPunk, sort of
Yeah,
ape
all
era
sorts
there
of
too.
really good stuff. And it was a generalist fund. AI was really picking up, and they really wanted to move from crypto to AI, and I was fully convicted on blockchain, right? So there was no way I was going to do that. And it's funny now. There's overlap, more and more overlap between blockchain and AI. But I saw this opportunity at the Solana Foundation and reached out to a friend, and that was nearly 2 years ago, and the rest is history.
Well, in that 2 years, I mean, Solana has seen a ton of growth. Like, what a difference, 2 years can make in crypto. So I'm curious about what's exciting to you now? Because everyone can kind of look back what's happened, but what are you excited about? Especially because you have this focus on institutions, which a lot of crypto projects think of as like the holy grail. Like, if institutions adopt a blockchain technology, that's really how the industry is going to grow. So what's your hot take on where is it now? How are institutions responding? And what are you excited about?
So I'll start with what I'm excited about. And the thing that I'm excited about is going back to the original vision of Solana, like in the white paper, one of the things that Tolly has talked about was this idea of on-chain NASDAQ. And I think we're actually getting there. There's obviously millions of tokens traded on Solana daily, something like 100 million daily transactions, tens of billions of dollars of daily transaction volume. And I think being able to extend the technology and the trading activity to equities and really bringing public markets onto the blockchain, I think is closer than it probably has been. There's still a lot of work to do. Recently, the foundation submitted to the SEC this paper called Project Open, along with Orca and Superstate, to kind of provide a potential path for on-chain IPOs. And I think that is incredibly exciting. So I'll start there. Incredibly excited about the idea of on-chain equities, and I think we're going to make it happen. With respect to institutions, in the last year or so, we've seen a number of asset managers build on Solana, Hamilton Lane and Apollo on the private credit side, Brevin Howard and Simplify on the hedge fund side. On the kind of traditional money fund side, we've got BlackRock, Biddle, Franklin Templeton, Benji. We've got Wellington coming online soon, a number of others. And so I think it's exciting to see that these asset managers see Solana, as not only a peer to Ethereum, but potentially even a more compelling protocol for them to build on. And I think, we've got a lot more coming soon. So it's very exciting. And then we also have seen, banks like Societe Generale, who's issuing a Euro stablecoin on Solana, begin to embrace the protocol as well. So I think early days for sure, but it went from 0 to 1, and the next stage is 1 to 10, and the next stage is 10 to 100. I think that'll happen very soon.
Do you think with those institutions that they are coming on board because they see that it's solving a really specific pain point? Or do you think it comes out of curiosity or trying to create new innovation? Like, has the narrative changed that they are demanding it versus, sort of being sold on what it can do?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with the whole idea of like Clayton Christensen and the innovator's dilemma and like the S curve. Like, good on these institutions to recognize that the way that they remain relevant in the future is to innovate, and essentially like compete against themselves. And I think BlackRock is a great example of this. You hear Larry Fink saying like the future of, equities and assets is on chain. And, they're same with, Jenny Johnson at Franklin Templeton and, many of these others. And I think it's important, to preserve, what these great financial institutions have built by making sure that they're the ones with pole position, as the future does move on chain. But then also there's like tons of incredibly innovative startups nipping at their heels, like the Ondos of the world, who have done an incredible job getting to $1 billion AUM in a fairly short amount of time, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with on-chain equities.
And so do you think that those institutions are like, how do you support them in your role? Are you educating them, or are you helping them think about the technical stack that they need to implement? Or how does that actually work in the day to day, like the nitty gritty? If someone were to step into your shoes for the month, like what are the things that they need to prioritize to really get these institutions onboarded?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above, right? So, it starts with being available and, developing a real, authentic relationship. That's table stakes for any, I think, partnership of any kind, whether it's in blockchain or not. And I think that's as true as ever, especially in blockchain. We like to say blockchains are trustless, but I think if anything, over time, the integrity means a lot, and the relationship building means a lot. And so that's like table stakes. And then from there, it's helping move them along in their journey, because working with large financial institutions is difficult. They have real internal risk that they need to comply with. And then they've got external regs that they need to comply with. And it makes it very long, protracted, and difficult to get these folks to be able to do something with public mainnet blockchain technology, even with the more permissive administration that we have right now. And so, kind of being there to like help answer, their million questions along the way, help them present the opportunity and the technology in the best possible light. I think that's really important.
So, you kind of mentioned regulatory. Given what's happened in the US this year, do you see more enthusiasm or optimism around regulation from these institutions? Or is that going to play into the speed at which these companies adopt, or is it kind of a moot point at this point?
No, it's definitely not a moot point. Like I just had lunch with an ETP issuer, and the analogy was the foot has been taken off of our throat, but it's not like there's like some like golden path to on-chain activity, because there still is not a stablecoin or market structure bill that has been passed. We have now seen drafts of these, both of them, which is exciting. So we have a sense of how they'll develop and what the shape of them will be. But I think until, they pass through Congress and, become written into law, you'll see folks continue to push at the edges, but you won't see them like rolling through until there's hardened legislation.
Yeah, I'd love for you to mention, I think we talked about some of the work that you guys are doing, the Solana Foundation with the SEC, just helping present different alternatives like in this space. I don't know if you can expand very much on that.
Well, so we recently announced the Solana Policy Institute, which is a really incredibly exciting development. Kristen from the Blockchain Association and Miller from the DeFi Education Fund joined the Solana Policy Institute, as well as a few others, to represent not only the Solana blockchain, but blockchain development generally in Washington, and help ensure that what is codified is favorable to public blockchains and all of the folks building on top of them. And so it's just incredibly exciting. And I think we'll see great things happening out of Washington later this year.
That's great. Yeah, that's great to hear. I feel like that's such an important piece, and the role Solana Foundation can kind of have there, especially because it does have such a large network and so many dApps built on top, is really helpful. So what are some of the other priorities in the Solana Foundation for this year? What are things, you guys continue to support builders. What are some of the other things out there?
Yeah, well, so I'd say like there's three main like work streams that everything falls under. One is just continuing to improve the Solana technology, and this is IBRL, increased bandwidth, reduced latency. Solana already is, the highest performing scalable layer one with 100 million plus daily transactions, and continuing to harden and improve the technology, make it faster, higher throughput, and more resilient and more decentralized. A lot of activity underway there. One of the more important and exciting developments is FireDancer, which is an independent validator client being built by Jump Crypto. Already has, I think, 3 to 5% of stake weight on mainnet. I think we'll see more and more validators roll over to that validator client over the course of the year. And so that's just like tremendously exciting. It'll take kind of theoretical TPS from 65,000 to 1 million, really opening up like pretty much any possible use case for the internet will be viable on Solana Layer 1 mainnet. So that's very exciting. Another is founders, applications, and tokens. So, we very much believe that the way to build a thriving ecosystem is to bring the best talent and the most capital, together to create that magic. And that manifests itself in applications and tokens. And so we're constantly trying to support and bring the world's best builders, the Solana ecosystem, supporting them in the applications that they're building. And then, of course, the tokens that they're bringing to the blockchain. And the last would be going into depth on the tokens is really assets that move. So we're really looking to bring, and this goes back to where I started, which is what I'm excited about, tokenizing equities and bringing more trading of valuable assets on chain onto Solana.
So one of the surprising things to me was when we spoke earlier this year, we were at CFC in Switzerland, is the size of the Solana Foundation. Like it's actually fairly lean given the amount of work that you guys do and kind of implement. So I'm curious, in your 2 years there, like what have you found works best? Like if another ecosystem, they're trying to grow, they're trying to attract founders, they're trying to, develop out their ecosystem. What have you learned in terms of like how the team is either structured or how you guys think about getting things done to really make the most impact, even as like in some ways like a much smaller team, especially given your reach of ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think it starts with like culture. Everything does, right? Like what's saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and that stems from our founders. And we have like an authentic builder culture at Solana Foundation. I mean, it's coursing through our veins. It's all we know. Like, and we don't have to try hard to have a builder culture because it's just who we are. And I think, every single person that joins the Solana Foundation like has that in their DNA. And then it's just about replicating, right? It's just about replicating, just like making sure that we remain true to who we are and being a champion of builders. And I think that the bat signal, so to speak, is like pretty loud and pretty clear for that, and attracts great builders because they see it and they know how authentic it is as part of our DNA. So that's like fundamentally important, and you can't buy that. You can't like adapt into that. It either is like in your DNA, like in the nature of who you are, or it isn't.
Yeah. How do you hire for that then though? So like what is, I'm sure anyone listening is like, great, like I want those types of people. Is it, they're always on? Is it like a 24/7 culture? Is it that they've built things in the past? So you look for this sort of like appetite for trying to get things solved quickly, or is it getting things solved perfectly? What's sort of the
No,
vibe there?
definitely not perfectly. I think we're definitely, kind of a move fast culture. Trying to break fewer things for sure, but definitely a move fast culture. I think it's all the things that you just said, right? I think when you hire people who were founders themselves, I think that is a great way to filter for sure. But we also look for humility, and integrity and authenticity. We really are a team, and we really exist to serve the builders in the ecosystem. It's not about us, like at the Solana Foundation, it's about the builders in the ecosystem. And so I think making sure that we find people that, kind of have that skill set where they can kind of learn anything and do anything and have a willingness to do it, are very reflexive or are very responsive. Like, I think that's all table stakes. And then folks that have the humility to like let the builders shine. So like we get invited, to speak on panels all the time. My first reaction always is like, is there someone in the ecosystem that I could put in my place for that invitation? Because I'd rather them be on the panel talking about what they're doing, because ultimately that's the best reflection on Solana, is like what the builders are doing on it versus like us who are merely, here to, largely just get out of the way.
Yeah. Well, how do you solve for that then? I know from working at the Stacks Foundation, we supported a lot of builders, but there was always so many needs, and they were always very diverse for founders and builders. And so at a certain point, it was like some systems scaled, other things they just didn't. So trying to figure out like how do you draw the line of how you help builders in a way that's like very effective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, listen, at the end of the day, like if whatever the builders are doing, like isn't working organically, like, I think that it becomes pretty clear pretty fast if the dogs are eating the dog food. And once they are, things tend to work quite well. And so I think the job is letting 1,000 flowers blossom. You just got to plant a ton of seeds. You got to water a ton of seeds, and you just don't know what's gonna work. And so you've got to be, um, supporting as many kind of believable founders as you possibly can that have big ambitious ideas, and support them in like small, non-scalable ways, frankly, and hope that many of them end up finding some success and kind of just go off to the races.
And do most of those founders come through like a grants program, or, I know you guys have very epic events and hacker houses. Like, is there one path that you think has been more successful and kind of more founders have chosen?
I think it goes back to just like replicating the DNA. We try to make sure that folks know like who Solana is, what the foundation does, and the benefits of the Solana and performance of the Solana blockchain, and some of the builder DNA that is core to what pulls all that together. We do host events, all over the world, and oftentimes, by the way, that's done through community organizations and not the foundation itself. The foundation only has like 65 or so employees, and yet we have this model called Super Team, which are community organizations that are all over the world that help make Solana not only global, but local in markets like Turkey and Nigeria and France and the UK and Ireland and, Japan and, all over the world, Singapore. And they're constantly UAE, they're constantly bringing builders together, and, those builders are bringing more builders. And I think it really just does snowball. And it's now become something that is really rolling and growing largely on its own. We of course keep seeding it and, help pushing that ball, but it's picking up a lot of its own, natural momentum. And that's what you want to see, because we are small. We can only do so many different things. And so it's great to see community members picking that up, and helping grow it.
Have you found that those types of communities help grow on the institution side? Are they kind of talking to larger partners, or are they more like grassroots founders community?
Totally both, right? And and it goes both directions, right? Like if somebody sends something my way, that something core like Japanese, like I am no expert in Japan. I'm not even a novice, right? And so the first thing I'll do is I'll reach out to the super team in Japan and say, hey, like, what do you know about this? Or can you help support this team or this institution? And then similarly, if something comes in through one of the super teams and they're just like, hey, this asset manager in the Middle East wants to do XYZ, and they were hoping to take some of the learnings from what BlackRock did with BUIDL on Solana, like, can you talk to them? And the answer is like, yes, absolutely, 100%. And so I think it really does become quite symbiotic, and the activity just becomes pretty generative.
That's great. So with the institutions, sort of going forward, do you think there will be more collaboration across chains in order to onboard these institutions? Or are there big blockers that, if the infrastructure existed for all blockchains, then it would make it easier to onboard? Some of this is like looking in the crystal ball, like what you kind of see or wish existed in this industry to make it easier to get institutions in.
Yeah, I don't. So I think I tweeted yesterday or today that interoperability is a red herring. I think like we are in a kind of an awkward adolescent phase of the blockchain, this whole multi-chain thing. I think we will outgrow that. And, you'll have Bitcoin, you'll have Solana, and maybe there's, some third, maybe a fourth, I don't know. And by the way, Solana loves Bitcoin. We recently brought someone into the foundation whose role is to bring more Bitcoin activity to the Solana ecosystem and blockchain. But I think there's a lot of blockchains out there today. Block space is abundant, somewhat commodity, frankly. So I think one is like you have to have the highest performance specs, and Solana has that. I think two, you have to have incredibly great enabling technology and UX. So one, making it just crazy easy for devs to build on your protocol. Two, having, the application layer being like absolute best in class. It's got to feel as if you're not even using the blockchain, right? And then when you have high performance blockchain, really great enabling technology and UX, then bringing that labor and capital into the ecosystem, like on top of that great technology and blockchain, that's what I think creates the flywheel, because that talent and capital go to make further investments in the open source underlying blockchain into the application layer and enablement layer, and that leads to even more talent and capital coming to your ecosystem. And I think we're just beginning to really see that flywheel spin in the Solana ecosystem.
Have you guys done anything in particular then around talent to kind of feed it in?
Yeah,
People think of
100%.
training or hackathons, but like, has one thing worked? Because, I know this is like a very
Also,
common thing a foundation does. Yeah.
again, like we're super small. So our head of talent, it's not like there's like a dozen open roles at the foundation that we're recruiting for. And so what our head of talent does is not only help recruit people into the Solana Foundation, our talent team's role is to help recruit people into the Solana ecosystem. So we have a pretty good beat on like incredible talent that's out there looking to join ecosystem teams. And then we also have a good database of who's hiring, and kind of bringing those two together. And there's been some incredible hires in the ecosystem recently, like Jito hired Thomas and Rebecca Reddick, Marinade hired Hadley Stern, and there's like so many other examples of this where just like incredible talent is being brought into the Solana ecosystem.
I love it. It's almost like you're curating all these different networks. Like you have like the regional global networks, you have this talent network. Are there any other types of those networks that you guys help like leverage to build?
It's all networks all the way up and all the way down.
That's what we love in the blockchain. Just keep it decentralized. That's
Yep.
awesome. Okay, so you did mention a little bit of AI. I know it was more where there's like some interest growing there. Do you have any thoughts of like how that's going to impact what happens in the Web3 space in the next few years? I know there's all sorts of dApps and things there, but is it going to materially change, the way we think about utilizing block space?
I'm sure it will. I mean, like if I had some great idea, I'd go build it. But I think the interesting things that I'm seeing are, in the institutional space is AI being used, for example, like collateral management, like liquidity pool management, taking, like anyone who's ever been liquidated while they were sleeping will appreciate like the idea of like having AI, add to your position, overnight, if there's a big drawdown. So I think we're going to see more of that type of activity. You're of course seeing all of these token bots like Clanker on Farcaster. There's one called JesterBot on Solana on Twitter. And so I think, these whole like token creator platforms, and of course all the trading bots. And this goes back to like BonkBot and Telegram. And, now there's like many others. So I think you'll see that advance. There's like, I've seen some really interesting AI use cases on the risk side, like, smart contract auditing, another kind of like risk evaluation. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be all sorts of use cases of AI in this space, and we welcome them all.
That's great. Yeah, I think I worry that there's like for better or worse. I think there'll be some really good ones, but also, spam bots using AI to like get more sophisticated or sort of creating more noise that value may also exist. So are there other things in the Solana ecosystem you're excited about, certain dApps you use or applications? If someone's listening and they should go check out a certain thing that you've seen?
I mean, I love all the builders and applications in the ecosystem.
Of course, they're all loved. Yeah, you don't have to
You know,
pick a favorite child.
one that I've been like really impressed by, just because like the speed at which they're adding really cool, useful features has been impressive, is Fuse. So Fuse is a mobile wallet that's built on top of the Squads multi-sig protocol. Squads is like the equivalent of like Gnosis Safe in the Solana ecosystem. And basically Fuse is a 2 of 3 multi-sig mobile application where it's got biometrics, email, and then your iCloud backup. And so as long as you've got, any 2 of those 3 keys, like you can recover your wallet. They've done some really cool stuff. They've built in some DeFi vaults directly into the product, where with a single click, you can deposit your stablecoins, for example, and get yield. They've added some things where you can basically map your wallet to a bank account, so you can very easily on and off ramp, like directly from your bank account right into your wallet. And they also now have a debit card, so you can have your stable coins in your wallet, directly tied to a debit card, that goes in your Apple Pay. So, it can be a cardless, mobile wallet that can be used to buy anything in the real world. So that's one in particular that I think has really done a good job, like vertically integrating and like building out, end to end. That's a pretty cool one to check out, is Fuse, Fuse.
Very cool. Yeah, I love when it's like making it easier for people to use it. And it's like using tools they already know and understand, like a debit card, and just connecting it into the infrastructure. That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so just last few minutes, I just wanted to hear, if someone is working, they're doing BD in crypto, they're looking to onboard on institutions, maybe they're already in the Solana ecosystem, but they have, they're selling a certain type of product. What advice would you give them to be successful? Either, what are the ways that they should be following up with clients? How should they be onboarding them, that you could share with others?
I mean, listen, I think it really comes down to like authentic human connection. I mean, look, Brittany, you and I like found ourselves like literally met at a train depot, hadn't ever seen each other, come across each other. We rode along together, made a pit stop in Zurich, and, we're still connected, right? More deeply now. And I think that is something that is the basis for any business relationship. It starts with like a human connection. And nurturing that. I think that's something that's easier said than done. And, it's not just about like showing up at all the various conferences, in far-flung places around the world. It's about taking the time, to stop and think and get to know somebody. And when you see something that you think is relevant or helpful to them, it's like, without thinking twice, just like sharing it with them and thinking of them and helping them. And I think that, the world does all come back around, and it really is that easy.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, not everyone can get on a train, but you're right. Like, online, it's easy to reach out and just be helpful to people too. It doesn't have to just be
Well,
going
no,
to these conferences.
I would say actually you do have to meet in person in the meet space. Like I don't think I'd be very curious to hear anyone who's really moved something meaningful forward without ever having met, in person, especially with institutions. I think it's fundamentally important to
How
be.
how do you get in the door with them though? How, are you like on LinkedIn? Hey, can we go meet up? Or is it
I am
you're showing up where they
1000%
are?
sliding into people's DMs on LinkedIn. Absolutely. I have LinkedIn Sales Nav Pro, and like even today, I still, if I don't have a warm connection, which now, often am able to get, absolutely, I'm gonna, kind of hit their email or slide into their Twitter DMs or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's just like hustle and then get the door open and then, create that authentic relationship. By the way, these things take, in some cases, years, right? This is not like snap your fingers and it's done. And so it's kind of maintaining the cadence, maintaining, and building, that trust, providing value consistently, over long periods of time. I mean, I think that is how you build durable, relationships, partnerships, and outcomes.
Yeah, I mean that totally echoes my experience just, working. And I think the other benefit in crypto is that the industry changes so fast that sometimes, there may not be a way to work together. And then something
Yeah.
changes, the technology changes, someone changes roles even, and then it just creates a lot of opportunity. It is like a very long, sort of open door of like, okay, yeah, if there's ever a place to support each other, it's been really cool to see.
Yeah, 100%.
So, where can people find out more about, I guess, a few things you mentioned? So, if they're interested in learning more about like Solana Foundation, how you guys support founders, and then also maybe if they're just a talent looking for opportunities, like how do they get in touch with the Solana Talent Network as well?
Yeah, so I think on Solana.com, it might be Solana.org. Solana.org is the foundation website. Solana.com is like the public marketing site for the Solana blockchain. We have all those roles listed, and you can also like resume drop just more generally for our head of talent to help support your search. So definitely check that out. If you want to reach out to me, I'm at Nick Ducoff on Twitter. I'm at Stoically Soul on Telegram. I'm very responsive. Feel free to ping me if I can be helpful. We really welcome all builders, and very much are grateful for the folks that are putting themselves out there and taking risks.
Well, thank you for sharing and thanks for giving out your contact info so people can get in touch as well. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Brittany.
Great. Thank you.